We took a Boeing 737 and our hostesses who smile because they want to. San Antonio for a lovable $20. You'll love Southwest Airlines.
Have you wondered why Southwest Airlines is able to offer such low prices on their flights? In addition to low prices, Southwest has been able to generate a huge amount of loyalty to the brand for many reasons. Part of it's price, but in addition, it feels like a fair company to deal with in terms of the charges for changing your flight or adding luggage or whatever. But from my perspective, what's the most interesting thing about Southwest is actually how it got started.
At Southwest Airlines, we want our passengers to spend their time in the air, not on the ground.
The rumor I heard about how the company got started is that they had planned for the number of routes, the flights per day, et cetera, et cetera. All those plans required 4 planes. However, they could only get funding for 3 planes. What they did is they revamped their schedules, their operations, and whatnot in order to be able to fly those routes with only 3 planes. At some point or another, I think you probably heard that Southwest tries to turn its plane in 20 minutes or less.
That's why we invented the 10-minute turnaround. Our planes pull into the jetway, board passengers, and pull out again in 10 minutes or less.
They'll land a plane, disembark the passengers, embark the passengers, and then take off within 20 minutes. Now, I know that doesn't happen at many airports in this day and age, but back in the day, whenever the airports were less busy, that's what they tried to make happen. I think this is a great example of how Southwest thrived because they had a core goal around cost consciousness and efficiency, and that drove decisions throughout the company. It drove decisions around what planes they flew. It drove decisions around what airports they would fly into. Every decision was centered around cost and speed, and because of that, that's why they were able to create a network of flights and planes that for a long time was significantly cheaper than any of their competitors. In this video, we'll talk about 3 different concepts that we feel like are prime areas for improvement that can not just lead to incremental growth, but can lead to value increases in the company in millions or perhaps even tens of millions of dollars. The first topic I would like to talk about is sales and marketing. I would say that many companies that we work with, let's call it $20 million to $100 million range, lack sophistication within the sales and marketing. They'll simply say, well, whoever in customer service, he's really our main salesperson because he talks to the customer the most, and whenever the customer needs something, they'll call that person, and a lot of times we can get more work out of it. If you're making $5 million today, I would make the argument that if you had thought about a more sophisticated sales and marketing strategy, instead of making $5 million today, maybe it could be 7 or 8 or even 10. What we see here though is not only a lack of initiative to do this, also sometimes apprehension about what's going to be successful. Just because they want to do that doesn't mean they know how or can be successful. Completely understand where people are coming from whenever they voice those concerns or apprehensions or whatever. There's a disconnect because a lot of times whenever we're talking to business owners about potentially buying their business, they'll say, oh, well, we haven't done any sales and marketing, but all you need to do is do some sales and marketing and you can double this business overnight. I'll tell you, that just instantly raises a red flag with us. And why it does is because if a sales and marketing strategy or initiative were so easy and it would lead to overnight growth of doubling your business or whatever, why hasn't the business owner done that already? Chances are is that even though it might sound simple, it's much more difficult in reality to execute effectively. Another example within sales and marketing that we see a big potential for improvement in is pricing. So often we see companies do essentially cost plus pricing, where if it costs $10 to manufacture this, they think a 30% profit margin is sufficient, so they might charge the customer $13 for that unit. Now, I will say in many of the companies that we work with, particularly manufacturing companies, CNC shops, job shops, generally speaking, determining what the customer will pay for a product is very difficult. There is no marketplace where you can figure out what a fair price will be. You might realize that you're probably bidding against 2 or 3 other people that are going to submit quotes that you might know who they are, you might not, and it's really anybody's guess as to where those competitors might come in at. However, I think it is interesting to talk about Southwest here again. Whenever Southwest was getting started, their pricing methodology was fundamentally different than many of their competitors. Whenever Southwest was pricing a flight from, let's say, Chicago to Milwaukee, they would not look at what some of their competitors were charging for that flight, but instead they would look at how much it would actually cost to drive from that city to the next. Taking that concept back to the machine shop, you're not going to be able to know what your competitors are going to quote if they're producing the product in the exact same way, using the same materials, etc., etc. However, there's at least the potential to think about things in terms of, what might a competing process do, or might a competing process be lower in price or more costly in price? If you feel like your manufacturing method is much cheaper than how many other manufacturers would price that, perhaps that's your opportunity to raise prices a bit. The last thing that I want to do is, sit here in this chair and say that pricing is easy, because it's really not. However, I do think that there is the potential to think about pricing more and be more strategic about it in an effort to improve your margins and drastically increase the value of your business. The second topic is the avoidance of debt. Now, whenever we pursue a transaction, we typically will fund a portion of the purchase price with debt. We're not trying to lever this thing up incredibly highly to squeeze out every dollar of profit and have that go to debt service so that we can juice the equity returns. That's not it at all. Our philosophy is that prudent uses of debt can lead to increased returns, and we're a proponent of that. Whenever we're working with various business owners, sometimes we'll hear from the business owner and they'll be happy to tell you that the business doesn't have any debt. This is a scenario that's kind of like the sales and marketing situation. It's good to know that your company can operate without the need for debt, that you're generating sufficient cash flow, your working capital level is pretty low. I mean, that is great. However, it does call into question why you haven't put debt on the business. Are there no growth opportunities that you could pursue? That's potentially troubling. If we're seeing working with a company and it's like, well, how have you tried to grow? It's like, well, we can't grow. I mean, do you need new equipment, a larger staff to go after this or that? No, not really. Those potentially can be concerns. However, the philosophy of the business owner that doesn't want debt is also a little bit of a concern for the buyer as well. From the buyer, what we hear, the perspective that you could take, and we don't always take this perspective, but the perspective that you could take is that the business owner that is not comfortable taking on any debt does not have confidence about the future cash flows of the business. If the current owner of the business isn't willing to take on any level of debt because of concerns about being able to service that debt, well, how does that make us feel as the buyer? We're not only going to try and grow the business, but we're concerned about the stability of the current cash flow. If the current owner isn't confident in the current level of cash flow, why should we be? Again, not an issue where it is just a deal breaker or something where we're just going to walk away, but we do look for consistency in terms of how the business owner responds to certain questions. And this is an area that we would want to explore, because again, our view is, and what we've done successfully numerous times in the past, is use leverage to buy new equipment, to pursue new product lines, et cetera, and maybe we've just been lucky, but we have a pretty good track record of turning that use of leverage into tremendous additional value in the company. Third area that I would like to talk about is consistency within the decisions around strategy and whatnot. This goes back to the opening segment about Southwest, about how they did a great job of making all of their strategic decisions consistent around low cost as well as operational efficiency. What we see in businesses sometimes are that decisions in one part of the business are inconsistent with decisions in another part of the business. From that perspective, anybody could do this if they bought the right equipment and built the relationship, et cetera. At the very surface level of that relationship, you could say that this is a cost-only relationship. We need to do everything to reduce costs because that's what's keeping us in that relationship. That's certainly a perspective to take. However, that hasn't been the perspective that we've taken, at least not the complete one. Absolutely, we are always trying to cut costs. I mean, I don't think any business can survive for a long time if they're not mindful of trying to not only produce a product at an effective price, but also trying to reduce that price over time. And that's certainly key focus for us there. However, we tried to find differentiation or ways that we can differentiate ourselves even in an environment that is largely driven on cost. I mean, this is really incredibly simple, but or at least for this particular company, one way that we've been able to do that is just by saying yes to the customer. If they have a difficult product and they ask us if we can do it, we say yes, we absolutely can do it. Give it to us and we'll take a look at it and we'll be able to handle it for you. Anything we can do to help you, we're going to do it. We're going to do the best job that we can. We're going to get you the quantities you need, when you need them, at the price you need them. Another great example of this is our portfolio company, Southwest Steel. Under prior ownership, it was always perceived that a certain type of customer's work we could not pursue because we didn't have the right equipment. The pricing required for that type of work was just so low you couldn't make any money off of it. For a while we owned the business, we took that as truth and didn't really pursue it. What we came to find out though is that one, our customers wanted us to do that, and we would reluctantly take on some of that work even though we weren't losing money on it, but we certainly weren't making very much money on it. And because of that, we weren't like the vendor of choice for some of these customers. Whenever we slowed down a bit due to COVID, we decided that this was a great opportunity to buy a few pieces of equipment whenever we had the manpower available to help install the equipment, to add this functionality, add this capability, so that whenever our customers came calling, not only could we say yes, not only could we get it to them for the price that they needed, but we could actually make a decent amount of money on it. Here's an example of a decision that we made to be a more effective, a higher value vendor to our core group of customers, that not only were we able to achieve that goal, we actually were able to bring on new customers that we hadn't really been pursuing before. The concept of aligning your strategic decisions around one or two goals is the most effective. And in numerous examples for at least our portfolio companies, that core strategic decision or focus is being the vendor that your customer wants you to be, even if that's not your core business or the types of products or services that you really want to perform for your customers. These are some of the areas that we see time and time again with the companies that we're looking at in terms of potential acquisitions. We talked about pricing in this video, and currently these videos are free. So what do you think? Am I undercharging for these videos or charging the right price? And I certainly hope that I'm not overcharging for these videos. That would put me in a pretty bad position, don't you think? Let me know in the comments. If you do think I'm overcharging these videos, please check out the 4 Pillars website for our return and refund policy. But please be warned, it's a little bit brief.